welcome. This is Paul Sandhu on Thursday, July the 17th, 2014, coming to you with another episode of Wake Up and Live Radio. It is my pleasure once again to welcome Ms. Leuren Moret from Berkeley, California. Leuren has been a guest on this program already 2 or 3 times, so she needs no new introduction. But I just want to mention that Leuren is a scientist, an independent scientist, not affiliated with any major corporation or university. She is a great researcher, and she goes deep down into the cause and the root of the problems that we have in our world today, especially in regards to the geopolitical developments and the issue with nuclear energy and radiation. So hello and welcome, Leuren.
Thank you, Paul. It's always very nice to be on your program, and I wish I could talk to the audience and answer questions and ask questions, but we can't do that. So I want to thank them for listening.
You know, one day we will look at that kind of format where we'll try and do exactly what you're talking about, the live show with some audience feedback. That would be a really good format to do a program with you, and I will look into it, and maybe logistically, if it's feasible, then we shall do that in the near future.
Exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have much to cover, and in regards to the fast developing North American Union, on which you have some great information. Also about the subject of nuclear false flags and false flags in general, as well as an update on Fukushima. Before we do that, I have one question or a topic that we have discussed in the past in regards to the disappearance of the Malaysian Airlines flight 370. And today there are reports that another Malaysian Airlines flight has crashed. And some are saying that it's been shot down, but it is definitely crashed somewhere over Ukraine. That seems very suspicious to me, that within a matter of 3 or 4 months you have 2 major commercial airlines. I believe they were both Boeing 777s, by the way, that have gone down from the same airline. Do you have anything that you wish to add about the disappearance of that flight, or about this current crash that has happened today or yesterday?
Well, unfortunately, 295 people died, and it was shot down by a ground-to-air missile in the Ukraine by one of the armed interests in that operating in that region. So it's probably a hit on Putin, on Russia. I mean, a political sort of attempt on his credibility and so forth.
So it'll be blamed on Russia,
yeah,
even though they may not have shot it down.
Yeah, and they'll just say, well, he armed the rebels and the rebels shot it down and this and that. But Putin has displayed very measured, very careful diplomacy. He is not a trigger-happy guy at all. He only uses force when he needs to use it, and when there's nothing political to gain, he backs off. And this would certainly not be in his best interest to be involved in shooting a commercial plane down. And it does kind of look like the CIA and MI6 was probably involved.
Well, I know that's more than likely that that is something we'll never know for sure who exactly was the culprit. But I mean, with the people who know something about these operations like you do, I think that is a very logical conclusion. Now, the fact that this is from the same airline leads me to also at least speculate that perhaps Malaysia has not been playing ball with some of these powers that be, and they are being sent a very strong message. So that's just speculation on my part. There's no way to prove that either, but otherwise, why would it be the same airline in such a short period of time?
Well, the reason is because Malaysia's only Fortune 500 country is the Petronas Oil Company that belongs to the government and the people of Malaysia. And it's Dr. Mahathir, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, who created Petronas for the Malaysian people. I know him very well. He's invited me to 2 war crimes conferences in Malaysia. It was an incredible experience to see how he modernized Malaysia. And this is really part of the pivot to Asia, which Obama announced on his last visit to Eastern Asia. And he did visit Malaysia as well. He's fluent in Indonesian. He's lived in the area as a child, and I'm sure that's part of the reason he's the President of the United States, because this pivot to Asia is not a small thing. The whole U.S. Navy was redesigned for this new orientation and move to Southeast Asia.
So they're moving away from the Atlantic sector or the Atlantic theater to the Southeast Asia Pacific region.
About 2010, I was in Hawaii, and oh no, it was before that. It was 2007, and there was a Pacific Command changeover for Navy admirals, and one of them, the one who was leaving, Gary Roughhead, said, well, we are abandoning the Atlantic. We're not interested in it anymore. We're moving 95% of our men and our ships to the Pacific. Hawaii is really a big headquarters, and practically the whole archipelago is a military base. And he said all of the action now is in the Pacific. We're monitoring the energy traffic, these big oil ships, petroleum ships that are taking crude oil and whatever to Asia from the Middle East. And it's a whole new game now. It's a whole new economy being created in Russia and China. It's Brzezinski's middle space that he talked about in The Grand Chessboard, which is a great book for anyone to read. He wrote it for his students at Columbia University, and he sets all the foreign policy for the United States. So it's very informative.
Okay, yes, I'm sure there are, like an onion, there are multiple layers to this story, which will be uncovered over time as to what exactly was going on and why. So we will put it on the shelf for now and come back and revisit it again in the future. Now, you wanted to talk today about this North American Union, which I believe you see signs of, or very unmistakable signs of, down where you are living. So can you tell us a little bit about why it has caused you concern?
Well, the North American Union caused me concern, but, quite frankly, I always wondered why Canada and the U.S. had the same country code, because we're certainly not the same country. And now we know why. This New World Order and Queen Elizabeth, the sovereign ruler of England, Great Britain, and the Commonwealth, owns the mineral rights as the sovereign ruler to the entire Commonwealth. It's many, many countries and territories. It's not just Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the British Isles. So as this new economy in Central Asia, China and Russia, develops and expands and picks up speed, and it is very, very moving very rapidly, the expanding and growing, developing China will need, as well as India too, will need mineral resources. And Queen Elizabeth is planning to mine much of Canada, as well as an ongoing longer-term mining project in Antarctica. So the Canada, I'm a geoscientist, and I've always known that Canada is very, very mineral rich, very rich in minerals. And it's also had a very small population. They've kept it at a low number as compared to the United States. We have a much larger population than Canada. And this mineral treasure will be mined all over Canada, wherever the deposits are, but they will be sending it down the NAFTA highway through the central part of the United States into Mexico. And in Mexico, it will be loaded on ships in Mexican ports and shipped off to China, and perhaps Russia too will buy some of the minerals or need them. But it will be primarily China and India.
Okay, so now tell us about, I mean, I agree with you that Canada is indeed very rich in many resources which are coveted,
Yes.
and that's why the Chinese in particular have been investing very, very heavily here and buying, large tracts of land,
Yes.
and also some mining operations and such. And so this is going to, of course, be exploited at some point in the future. Of that, there is no doubt. Now, you said that, now you were talking, I heard you talk with Alfred, and you were discussing the role that Janet Napolitano is playing down in your neck of the woods in implementing a homeland security state. Can you please enlighten us a little bit about that?
Yes, Janet Napolitano is a very mysterious person, and she suddenly became governor of Arizona and was involved in these disputes on the border and fencing off the southern border of the United States. They're really shutting down the U.S. and turning it into a big gulag or a sort of a Soviet-style prison camp.
Is that, can I interrupt for a second, Leuren? Would that be to keep the outsiders out or to keep the insiders in? Meaning, like, is that designed to keep the Americans in, or is it designed to keep foreigners out, like the Mexicans out?
The American people, the citizens of the United States, are going to be picked clean until there is not a piece of meat left on the turkey carcass. And in order to steal the resources, take over the country, and control everything, including any retaliation by the American citizens, they will be locked down and stripped of their wealth and their commonwealth, the commons, the national parks, and so forth, and immobilized. The fences, instead of barbed wire, will be electronic EMF technologies that, if you get into the beams, they create terrific pain and disable people.
Can I tell a little story in regards to that?
Yes.
That is something which people do not pay much mind to. Everybody can picture barbed wires, harkening back to the days of the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. What people don't realize is that this electronic gulag is much more dangerous. For one thing, it's invisible. Okay, this is a little anecdote, and I'm sorry for taking your time, but I think it's important. I have a little man, a person that I know. He's a handyman who does some work around my, house and stuff. And he was telling me a story just the other day. And he said he has a cottage up north here in Lake Country, and people here, they go to their cottage in the summer, in the winter they shut it down. So before they do, they winterize it and do whatever needs to be done. So he left, he shut this cottage down last winter, and he, came back to the city for the winter months. And then when he went back in there, what he saw was that a squirrel had gotten in there, and it had destroyed, basically it had damaged a lot of his furniture and other things. Now the interesting part of this story is that what this man has, and this technology, I wasn't even aware of it, that it existed. He said you can buy this electronic device. And what it does is it sends out these waves, like radio waves. And what it does is it keeps the rodents away, okay? Because they can't stand the pain or the discomfort that is caused by these waves that are emitted from this device. So when the squirrel fell off from the chimney into his cottage, he said that he thinks that because he had that rodent device in there and there was no way that the squirrel could escape, it tortured that squirrel so much that he found it under 3 cushions on his couch, that as if it was trying to hide itself to get away from the pain or discomfort that was being caused by this device. So the point of the story is that if they have perfected these devices for animals, where they know exactly what frequency to use for which animal to cause it the maximum pain or discomfort, or even to kill it, then is it so hard to believe that such frequencies have already been discovered to be used on human beings?
Oh, the U.S. Navy started developing them as soon as World War II was over. 1946, they were already going into the phase that we're in now, the takeover, the overthrow of the United States. And there is, I have a patent on hidden car antennas that came out in the 1990s. The patent was allowed to lapse so that anybody could use it, and it was the shadow government or the U.S. government putting out a template for car antennas for car manufacturers and industrialists who wanted to manufacture these hidden antennas. And the cars of choice, from what I'm observing here in the city of Berkeley in the Bay Area, the Priuses, the hybrid cars, Priuses and Teslas with big batteries in the car are the car of choice for vehicle gang stalking, where convoys or individuals in cars, trucks, whatever they're in, even police cars, are driving around and blasting people walking up and down the sidewalk, sitting in restaurants, minding their own business, and even they have very sophisticated synchronized gang stalkers in vehicles. They come and park them in front of your house and walk off, and there'll be 5 or 6 or 7 of them blasting you from different angles and positions, and it's a pinpoint focus on the individual target. It's horrifically disabling. And I've had a member of the Japanese parliament stay here, and he was targeted the whole time he was here. I didn't know how, but now I do know what they're doing. And what I did was I got a transistor radio, pulled the antenna out, went out and walked up and down the street around cars, and the static told me which cars were hot and transmitting. So you can use very, very simple devices that are ordinary things in your home or easy to buy in an electronics store to monitor these technologies. But they are in restaurants, they're in hotels. You can't even walk up and down the sidewalk in San Francisco now without getting blasted as you walk by a hotel. They're telling you to not come in. We got cut off.
All right, he'll call back. Good, gives me a chance to cough.
Yeah, I saw you trying not to cough.
Okay, Leuren.
Yes.
Okay, I think there was an interruption in the connection.
Where did I get cut off?
Just when you were talking about how these devices are in the cars and restaurants, etc., I've also not just heard, I'm sure this is a fact, that they are one of the big places where they're hiding them is in cell phone towers, and these things are now everywhere, and they're even disguising these towers as church steeples and lamp posts and such. So it could be, for all intents and purposes, we are living inside a hole. The gulag has already been created, and it could be, the attack could come from anywhere. So therefore, people, that if you need to control a population, it seems to me that that would be the easiest way to do it, is to create this electronic fence, which you have been speaking about.
Well, that is what the main purpose of the cell phone towers and the cell phones are for. It's to create the densest antenna network in the United States. It's the cell phone antennas and cell phone towers, and they're very powerful. The Yugoslavians, during the NATO attack in 1998, they were using cell phones and cell phone towers and their computers to take over the computers on American fighter jets, and they were crashing them into the ground just from a cell phone tower. So they are very, very powerful. The androids are the computer cell phone of choice, and the whole campus of the UC Berkeley campus is fortified with military spec antennas all over the buildings. It's a whole cell phone network and other emergency purposes, and the students are walking around zapping each other and zapping anyone they want to who is identified as a target. And just a couple weeks ago, I tried to walk across the campus. I graduated from Berkeley, and you can't make it across the campus now without being blasted every 3 minutes.
I was doing another program with the young man who's done a documentary on essentially smart meters and smart technologies.
Oh.
And in that he had some very tragic anecdotes about these students in, I think they were in San Diego, and that have died from all these brain cancers. So it's just horrifying what these technologies do to people, and then they are being used intentionally, which is even a greater crime in my book than if it was being done, accidentally or just as a byproduct of the technology.
Well, I'll tell you what happened and why I'm speaking out now. 1 year ago, I believe at the end of June of 2013, the University of California announced that they had just hired Janet Napolitano, the former governor of Arizona, who was involved in the border mess. And also, she was then transferred to be the head of the Department of Homeland Security, which is based on the Phoenix program in Vietnam, which the military developed to destroy and undermine and assassinate the civilian support of the Viet Cong resistance. Well, guess what? They developed that in Vietnam to use here in the United States on us, and it's being implemented now. Now, why would Janet Napolitano go from being governor of California to the head of Homeland Security and then the University of California? I mean, those are some pretty big career jumps with very little justification. And after I did this interview that I sent to you on her, exposing all of this, someone posted a comment and said that Janet Napolitano went to Santa Clara University, just here outside of the San Francisco area, and that is a Jesuit college. Also, Governor Jerry Brown, who is now governor for the second time, he was elected in the 70s, I believe, and He is a Jesuit priest, a former Jesuit priest who also went to Santa Clara University. And then Leon Panetta is another mysterious Californian who suddenly was chosen out of nowhere to be head of, I believe it was the CIA. And all of these mysterious choices all lead to, now we know, the Jesuits. It's a Jesuit overthrow of the United States.
Now you're getting into some a subject which I suppose most people is very well hidden and most people would not be aware of it. But the fingerprints of the Jesuits are over basically not only the government of the United States, but essentially all of the major governments, at least of the Western countries, and then they exercise a great deal of control through their control of various corporations and such. So the Jesuit order is indeed, some people claim, the head of the beast, so to speak, the apex of the pyramid, and that seems to me that is where your research is leading you as well.
Yes, and I said, well, of course it's the Jesuits. I mean, Jerry Brown was the beginning of it, and the positioning, really. And so Jerry Brown and Janet Napolitano are actually actively committing treason, which is punishable by execution under the Constitution. And the University of California, with Janet Napolitano in place last October, I mean, nobody, the faculty and the students said, what are they hiring her for? We don't want her here. They had no voice in it at all. The University of California is a corporation, and the Board of Regents, which is the Board of Directors, they just do whatever they want to. So suddenly she shows up in October, but about 2 weeks before she arrived, there was a huge explosion early one evening on the Berkeley campus, and the whole campus was closed off for a bomb investigation. And I started laughing because there's never been a bomb that went off at the University of California, and there was such a big response. I knew it was a false flag. And it was announcing that Janet Napolitano was arriving. And it happened underground, in the underground conduits where the copper cables and electricity are threaded throughout the campus. And it happened between two of the administrative buildings. And it was kind of saying, well, Janet's on her way and things are going to be different. Get out of the way, administration, because new rules are coming in. And so the final analysis of after the investigation was that someone had been digging up copper electricity cables and cutting them to sell them for scrap metal. And this was between, in a special building between the campus and the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. So apparently it's some kind of a false flag message. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll find out pretty soon, because Janet Napolitano will let us know. So as soon as she arrived, she did a tour in the early winter of all the Berkeley campuses, all of the University of California campuses. And when she came back, there was a Christmas holiday. And on January 1st, 2014, this year, all hell broke loose. And suddenly the whole Bay Area was full of stalkers on the streets everywhere, zapping people when they went to restaurants, when they went to their banks, when they waited at bus stops. And it hasn't stopped. They have a new rollout of new levels of people, different clothing, different levels of education and affluence. and they keep rotating them through the Bay Area, moving them around in tour buses. And so now suddenly what is happening and her being hired has a whole new relevance, because the Jesuits went to China in the 1700s, 1500s, and to Japan, and took over those countries through a shadow government. China ended up with 250 million people being addicted to opium. The Jesuits were involved in that. The Jesuits were involved in the overthrow and the murders of millions of civilians in Central America. They were involved in all those overthrows and revolutions and everything, and it was to depopulate. And not only were they setting up civil wars that killed the young men, but when those were over, they would go in and just assassinate women and children so that a replacement population was not produced by the women to replace the young men who'd been killed in the civil wars. So they are very, very, very dangerous people. They also came out of and involved in the Masonic lodges in Europe in the 17 and 1800s. So the Jesuits are bad guys, and somehow they seem to be the rudder for the Catholic Church. Although they are not under the Catholic Church, they infiltrate and they influence and they misdirect and they pervert the Catholic Church and any place they go.
Well, the Pope is a Jesuit now, so I suppose the takeover of the Catholic Church by the Jesuit order is now complete. Okay, so now what do you think the whole agenda is behind sending Janet Napolitano to be the head of to be the dean of the University of California, and this subject of gang stalking, which some listeners may not be familiar with? Can you just tell us what exactly it is, what exactly you mean by that word, and what are these people doing that you say are being bussed in by the busload?
Well, the gang stalking is a sort of a social control, a political control of individuals in a population. In other words, people who are whistleblowers, change agents, patriotic people, honest people, for whatever reason, it's really usually big institutions, the military, universities, corporations, and even the government. The post office is riddled with gang stalking, but they have a lot of postal workers who are Masons, so it's not a surprise. And what they do is it's extremely well organized, and it starts with 4 or 5 people in a group. That's the bottom unit. There are 5 layers of controllers over each of those units, small units of people, and they only know each other in their own unit. They're very closely supervised. There are many things they're not allowed to do, and at the very top, it goes through different levels, and at the very top, it's lawyers who fund it, and the police departments run it locally. The FBI runs it federally, and then it's all over the world, actually. And we found when Peter Eyre, who's a former British naval intelligence officer who was an MI6 operative, he was targeted a couple of years ago. He's retired now, and he and a businessman, a corporate guy with money and juice, they were able to trace back a physical attack on Peter to a lawyer in the biggest and most respected law firm in London, who was doing hacking and sending out people to attack him. and interfering with every aspect of his life. So you see, this is very well organized, and it's really how the Occupy movement was organized by George Soros in every country. He used students. He funded them for programs to get them out of their own countries into foreign universities where they were recruited. And he funded the whole Occupy movement in Canada and the U.S. through a private foundation run by lawyers. So it's all dirty money or black budget money, and it's very well organized. It's a nightmare to go through.
Woe unto you, lawyers. Okay, let me make a comment here. You may not know, but I really am a big fan of science fiction. Okay? Science fiction movies and TV programs. There is a movie that I would highly recommend for you and for the listeners. It was done by the Sci-Fi Channel back in 2003. And this will tell you all the things that you're talking about, this gang stalking, this electronic harassment, this gulag, this electronic mind control is in this movie. And this movie is called Control Factor. You can actually even watch it on YouTube. So if you haven't seen it, Leuren, please watch that movie. It'll amaze you and it'll blow you away. About everything that you're discussing today was in that movie 10, 11 years ago, and it was probably written even a couple of years before then and produced. So you see, these things are not new. They have, and fiction is one great way that the powers that be let us know what they are doing and what technologies are available and at their disposal. So now this gang stalking that you're talking about, essentially what it boils down to is anybody that's opposed to authority, so to speak. In the old days, in the days of Nazis or Soviet Union, they just go and knock on your door, round you up, and you'd be disappeared into the gulag. And now they're just using these technologies which can literally drive a person out of their mind. It can destroy their bodies. It can do all kinds of things so that they just don't have the mental and physical capabilities left anymore to resist. Is that generally the purpose for this?
That is exactly what the purpose is, and the Soviets used it heavily in Russia. I was a staff scientist at the Livermore lab from 1989 to 91, 89 to 91 in the Bay Area. And I came into my laboratory one day, and my lab partner was there, and he said, "Oh, there are two Soviet KGB generals here." And I said, "We're in the Cold War. This is like 1989 or 90. And I said, "What are they doing here? We're at war with them. This is the most protected laboratory in the United States." And he said, "Oh, well, they're transferring the technologies of political control to the U.S. government." And I said, "What for?" And he said, well, they're turning the United States into the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union into the United States. And that's exactly what's happening now. And Janet Napolitano and Homeland Security are being run by her out of the University of California President's office. And they've already trained many thousands of students at University of California campuses to do this overthrow. And when foreign students come here, they're trained to go back and overthrow their own countries. So sending your own students to foreign countries, particularly the United States, is a very dangerous thing to do because they come back and overthrow your government.
So what you're saying is that what's going on in California right now is a template for what is to follow in the rest of the country and eventually across the globe.
And Canada and Mexico. This is a Janet Napolitano Jesuit in the shadows rollout of what is happening to bring the unification of North America together so that it's one region which will be administered by appointed officials, and we won't have any constitutional rights We will not have elections, and it's just going to be communism, but much, much worse than it was during the Soviet Union. It's going to be very ugly. And what they're doing now is they have been spraying the Bay Area, 5 planes, layers of planes at different altitudes since January 1st. And then they fluoridated the water. They put more chemicals in it, so it tastes horrible. It smells awful. They have put GMO foods in the grocery stores. They took inventories in January, February, and March. They sent Homeland Security into every food outlet. They went in and did inventories. They ran the cash registers for a week, and they did everything. They have all the information they want and they need about those food outlets. And they actually, Homeland Security has the ability to lock up all the food in the United States. And eventually they will do that and cause food riots so that they can come out with guns and shoot the rioting people. The United States is under a very intense, very rapid, very massive, very deliberate, and very, very well synchronized and executed depopulation. They're killing Americans right now. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you took that word out of my mouth, depopulation. Seems like that's the goal then, is to weaken, but also eventually to depopulate the nation. Well, that doesn't bode well for anybody living in the country.
Well, let me just show you what compared the cancer rate, for instance, for lung cancer in England. 1850 to 1860, there's a cancer registry in Cumbria, and that's sort of north of Wales. And the highest increase in cancer, comparing the cancer rates in Hawaii in 1963, which was the peak of bomb testing, to the cancer rates in pre-man-made radiation England, the lung cancer increased 10,000%.
Wow. Not surprising though, Leuren, not surprising. Okay, before we move on to our next topic, so what your research has shown is that that this totalitarian system, which lies in the country and the world's future, it is going to be very technological, and they don't necessarily need the jackboots to come knocking on the people's doors. It can be done remotely, and it can be done via these technologies that are being basically people are voluntarily bringing into their homes, such as smart TVs, telephones, your cell phones, smartphones, smart meters, and all these things. They are not just electronic devices for us to communicate with. They are actually
weapons.
They're weapons, and they're weapons of mind control. They're weapons of bodily control even, and they can essentially beam and they can take control of a person as a hacker can take control of your computer. Would that be a correct assessment?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. And not only that, the Malaysian flight that disappeared, it was shot down by the U.S. Navy in Malaysia in March. I was able to discover that INMARSAT, the satellite company that was searching for the lost plane, they control all of the, or they monitor and track all of the shipping traffic globally. They wanted to get a contract and to do global tracking of airplanes. Well, I found out, investigating that huge company, which is headquartered in London, that Janet Napolitano has already gone, when she was head of Homeland Security, to 15 Commonwealth countries and signed them up for Homeland Security and FEMA that we will provide in their countries, and they'll pay for it. And I also found out that that INMARSAT satellite system has all of our FEMA, Homeland Security, Department of Energy, and other governmental offices. All their data is already on their satellites, plus all the smart meters are hooked up to the INMARSAT satellites. And what they're doing now is putting together a global monitoring system through INMARSAT and probably other satellite companies as well, where they can sit at a keyboard in London or wherever they are, access the satellites, and they can know exactly what any person with a smart meter is doing, what appliance they're using, what they're thinking. They can transmit mind control through it and control any individual anywhere in the world who's hooked up to a smart meter. So you see, this is a very, very dark plan. It's typical of Jesuit thinking and people who are monarchists and believe in the divine right to rule, like Queen Elizabeth. And it's right in their agenda, and it does go all the way to the top, which is the Habsburg dynasties, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Holy Roman Empire. That's what the Habsburgs represent. And they're the ones at the top. Queen Elizabeth works for them. The Pope works for them. And they're running this with the help of the Jesuits.
Well, okay. Now, being that all the people that crave that kind of power and wealth, they generally have a character flaw, which is that they are downright evil. So obviously they don't have any good plans for the common people, and that is something that people should, be aware of. And that's why we are seeing all these things happening. So all of a sudden, if people start hearing the voice of God in their heads, they better be careful that it may not be God, the Creator, that's talking to them. It may be somebody on a satellite beaming some information down into their heads. So that's, at least we know these things, and I'm sure, being aware makes you, at least provides you a layer of protection that the general person would not have, who does not know about these things. So I thank you for informing us and bringing this information to our attention.
Well, Paul, actually, David Rockefeller and his colleagues, Zbigniew Brzezinski, they have stated in written books and even in their autobiographies, they've stated they were going to do this and described exactly how it was going to happen. And David Rockefeller said, we're putting everyone on a satellite. No one will be able to take anything out of the system that they have not put in advance already. In other words, it's a zero-sum game. We will all be slaves. And David Rockefeller said, and if they don't do what we want, we'll just turn them off on the satellite. It's all their money and everything will be on that satellite.
More than that, this is actually is even more insidious than most people think, because it is also linked, these technologies and frequencies, they are fine-tuned so much these days that they're linked to an individual's DNA.
They absolutely are.
Right? So,
yes.
I mean, they can literally target any person, because the DNA information, at least for North Americans and Western Europeans, has been collected going back to the 40s, and they have a database somewhere with all of our DNA signature from all of us that were born, I would say at least post-World War II. So that way they know if they want to target Leuren or Paul or whatever, they can do so remotely using a person's DNA.
Yeah, and they were doing that in the 1970s. I met a physicist who said, "Oh yeah, we were tracking each other in the laboratory by our DNA." And what people don't realize is we are antennas. Our bodies transmit and receive frequencies. And each person has a unique DNA, because that's why we're different from each other. Our DNA is different. And Actually,
It's like a cell phone. Each cell
yes,
phone has a unique address. So our
yes,
DNA is a unique address. So that
it's a
mine is different
yes.
than anybody else's, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. And the Finnish Minister of Health in 1998, I believe, she said 95% of Americans are already ID'd.
Oh yeah, I can totally believe that. Now, even in India, you may not be aware of it, they have, and it's being financed by HSBC, it does not surprise me enough. They are trying to create a database, a biometric database of the whole population.
Yeah,
They've already got like 400 plus million people in that database.
well, the Indians are extremely brilliant with computers and mathematics and astronomy. They're very, very scientific, and they have been for thousands of years. So I imagine that it happened very quickly in India. It would be well funded.
Oh yeah, very well funded. Very
Yes.
well funded program.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now let's talk about this other topic that you wanted to discuss, which is nuclear false flags, the theater of tension in the Middle East.
Well, this was a very lucky thing to do and to think of doing. I found this chart of monthly crude oil prices and that would be inflation adjusted as well, 1946 to the present. And I was looking at it and I said, oh, oil prices were flat until Kissinger's 1973 oil crisis in the Middle East. And I said, well, why did he do that? And I looked at, suddenly the oil prices were going up and down, even to the present. And so I was looking at times when the oil prices dropped and they would suddenly pop up again very quickly. And I went, gee, I wonder what boosted them each time. And what happens is the oil prices have been locked to the dollar. And when the dollar goes down in value, oil prices go down and profits go down. So I started looking up each year where these low points were, and then suddenly there was a big jump in the value of the dollar and oil prices, and I put them on the chart. And what I discovered was the Kissinger Middle East crisis is what kicked it off, and the Yom Kippur War. That's when Kissinger secretly gave depleted uranium weapons to Israel to use against Egypt and Syria, I think. Then there was the Iraq-Iran War that lasted 10 years, and that was to somehow manipulate the oil market and make people think there was a shortage and oil prices would go up, which they did. And then the next one was Chernobyl in 1986. As soon as oil prices were crashing, Chernobyl happened and the prices went up again. That, of course, was a nuclear power plant disaster. Then there was Lockerbie, and that was the plane crash that Libya was blamed for, but we know now from 2 or 3 documentaries that Al Jazeera or the BBC made after Gaddafi left office or was killed, that Libya didn't do it. And it's part of a strategy of Mediterranean theater in order to create tension in that region and manipulate the oil prices. Then there was the Gulf War in 1990. Of course, that was 4th generation nukes, which are neutron bombs and depleted uranium, and that it went on. Mogadishu in Somalia, the Yugoslavia War in 1995, NATO attack by NATO on Yugoslavia in 1998, Afghanistan in 2001, or was it 2? Then the Iraq War in let's see, was it
2003.
Yeah, 2003, exactly. Then the Israel attack on Lebanon in 2007. And so it goes on and on for the last 2 or 3 years also. And I said, my God, 9/11. Those were all false flags, whether they were wars or other kinds of disasters. They all involved nuclear materials, radioactive pollution released into the atmosphere, and they all boosted the dollar and the oil prices. So there you have this this economic relationship that shows that world oil prices and the U.S. economy has been supported and controlled and stabilized with nuclear false flag events. And there's no way to refute it. That's exactly what drives the oil prices.
Otherwise, like if we didn't have all these events like the oil embargo in 73, which was absolutely orchestrated by Kissinger and company, and suddenly oil shot up like 4 times the price.
It went from $20 to $120.
So you know what I mean? Oil should now, right now, people should be paying like maybe $1 a gallon at the pump or something. So here we are paying $4 and $5, and in Canada, which is an energy-rich country, we are paying like $6 a gallon. So this is totally understandable that it is an artificially created situations that actually create the shortages and in the end steal more money out of our pockets. So this, what's happening in Israel and Palestine, these are all situations that, this really surprised me, Lawrence. I remember the days of Jimmy Carter and INMARSAT and all these, in Golda Meir and all these people trying to bring peace to that region. And INMARSAT was all for it, and next thing you know, he's gunned down and shot, and that
right.
ends that process. So you have these 2 small nations in a small region, and after 50 years of trying, nobody can seem to bring peace to that region. That makes absolutely no sense to me. When the biggest powers in the world are trying to bring it about, I think if they really wanted to, their peace would have been there back 50 years ago.
Well, that's all street theater. What's really happening is that the Mediterranean, and especially the Eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, is part of a plate tectonic region where Africa is colliding with the Eurasian plate, and India is colliding with the Eurasian plate, and it's causing the Indian impact caused the uplift of the Himalayas, but right now the Mediterranean is being closed. But the whole bed of the Mediterranean, especially the leading edge of the plate, African plate that's moving north, is causing fracturing, and all of this methane and petroleum and gas products and everything outgassing from the mantle is collecting in fault zones and fracture zones. And offshore from Palestine, Israel, Cyprus, Turkey, there's a tremendous wealth of oil and gas deposits, and there was a British gas company drilling offshore from Palestine maybe 20 years ago, Noble Gas, and that's when all the trouble started. Because the British Petroleum and so forth, Shell Oil, have systematically gone all over the world, tying up, buying out, stealing all of the oil companies, so they will have control of all oil and gas. And what the irony of it is that oil is not a non-renewable resource. we have an infinite amount of oil bubbling up and collecting on the plate margins all over the world out of the mantle. We have an endless supply of oil and gas. They just want to control it all and hide that fact so they can manipulate and drive up oil and gas prices up and down and contaminate the whole planet with nuclear false flags and events, which carries out their agenda of depopulation, and get rich while they're doing that by manipulating oil and gas prices.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've actually read that Israel is going to be an energy powerhouse. So, this wealth of minerals and petroleum and natural gas that you're talking about is actually, it is factual, it is down there, and all these nations, I suppose, they have a vested interest in exploiting them. And of course, wherever there's energy, there's the big energy companies of the world, the Exxon, the Shell, and British Petroleum, they're all down there like a dirty shirt, so that is not surprising at all.
Well, before, let me just make a comment before we go on. The fact that Israel is announcing that it's going to be the biggest energy producer in the region is not what's going to happen. The leaders of Israel have been systematically contaminating Israel with bombing, the bombings of Lebanon, the bombings of Gaza, the weapons they've used in Gaza, and other surrounding countries. And what's happening is that Israel, the Israeli men, have the greatest decline in sperm quality in the world, and they are being sterilized. The settlers, who are troublesome people, are once they've used them for doing land grabs, now they're moving them to the most contaminated areas of Israel and killing them off because they don't want to deal with them. They're good for causing trouble and doing land grabs, but they don't want to deal with them. So it's the Israeli leadership that is exterminating its own people. And just remember, Britain created Israel.
Of course.
Britain created a lot of things, and when it's through creating them and getting what it wanted by creating them, it destroys them. The Israeli as a state, the Israeli people are being physically destroyed, mentally destroyed, and what they think is going to happen, the citizens of Israel, is not what's going to happen. It's already happened, and they're sterile.
Okay, well, not surprising. Okay, now before we finish off, Leuren, no program with you would be complete without you giving us an update on Fukushima. I read I think it was last week, that they had another earthquake that struck that area, wasn't there?
Yes. Last week, well, it was on July 4th that the typhoon, it's called Neogori, was a very, very intense hurricane, and it impacted Japan and caused huge torrential rains, and the power plant was already a marsh from walls that they built underground to keep the contaminated water in from going into the ocean. And so now this typhoon has also picked up the radiation from Fukushima. They had 3 earthquakes actually just before this typhoon arrived, and now they've had another one. I think it was a 6.8, and that typhoon picked up the radiation. And now we're having a new phenomenon with nuclear typhoons carrying that radiation all over the world. And most of that will end up from Typhoon Neoguri in Hawaii and the United States and North America, but especially the United States. So that's one of the problems at Fukushima. Every day it just gets worse, Paul.
So what does, how long do you think it will be before they say, okay, there's no solution to this and we need to, basically make a big sarcophagus out of it or something like they did in Chernobyl? I mean, something like that will need to be done. Like, this insanity that it just keeps going on, and everybody in the world knows it, that nothing has been contained, and yet they don't seem to be doing anything about it. Like, that kind of madness I don't understand.
Well, the problem is that, first of all, there are many, many mind control stations that are already bases down in Antarctica. And they're transmitting mind control through the Earth's magnetic field and targeting populations. Japan has 4 mind control bases in Antarctica. Britain has 9. The Russians have 7. I don't know how many the U.S. have, but some of the populations are already under extreme mind control. And that's the only way you could explain the really, really bad decisions TEPCO has made in Japan, and why no other countries have been allowed to go and help them with expertise and equipment and so forth. This is affecting the whole planet, and it's an international disaster. It's not a TEPCO disaster, it's an international disaster. And the problem is that the whole disaster has been controlled and run by British Petroleum Headquarters, which is personally owned by Queen Elizabeth in England, and they sent their orders to TEPCO and the Japanese government through Dr. Stephen Chu at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab right here in Berkeley, and gave him $500 million to set up a research park for energy at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab as a reward. And also, Obama was given $500 million by Queen Elizabeth for his election campaign. So she elected our president, Obama, and then Dr. Stephen Coonan, who was a British petroleum scientist, although he's American, he was hired by Stephen Chu to be his undersecretary for science, and the two of them ran the information from BP headquarters through the Department of Energy straight to the Japanese government and TEPCO. And so they controlled the whole response. And it's all turned out exactly the way it was intended to turn out, to be a permanent nuclear source of pollution to escalate this global depopulation agenda.
How bad are things getting in, for example, in Tokyo? Are the people realizing that they're getting worse, or are they still oblivious to it?
Well, this is very sad, Paul. I just had a Japanese couple come, and they updated me on what was happening, and they said nobody in Japan talks about Fukushima. Although people are running all over the place everywhere with Geiger counters measuring the radiation constantly. And there are bloggers and scientists and so forth who have been doing measurements and putting them on the internet, thank goodness, because the governments around the world are releasing nothing. And so it's a permanent disaster. It will go on for hundreds of years, and there's no way to put a sarcophagus on it because the fuel had all melted and burned through the reactors by 7 p.m. of the day that the earthquake and disaster happened in the early afternoon. So there's no way to recover that melted fuel because it's burned down. It's 80 feet below the surface of the plant now, down, far down in the ground. And if you did even, you were able to extract it from the ground, what would you do with it? You can't turn it off. It just keeps fissioning. It's very, very hot. and there's no way to deal with it. They made such a mess out of it that it's too late.
Well, on that note, Leuren, on that high note,
Well, let me say something, Paul.
Sure.
If they use the HARP technologies, which they may well intend to do after they've made such a mess that they've killed out most of the global population, they will use that HARP technology to clean it up. And they can transpose, they can transcend that that radiation in the molten fuel or wherever it is, whatever it is all over the world. They can convert it to energy waves. That's
transmuted.
Yeah, they can transmute it. That is Einstein's E equals mc squared. These are energy regimes that are, they could do it right now. They could have done it before Fukushima even turned into a disaster.
Like considering these things then, because this seems like it would be like a slow death that is being these chemtrails. And I was looking up where I live today and they had the spraying going on. I even took a couple of pictures, which I was going to send you, but didn't get around to it. So that goes on here also over Toronto quite a bit. So these things that they keep doing, like this Fukushima, it seems like, this is all a process of slow death. But I think that eventually it'll have to move from a slow phase into something, a little bit more rapid. And do you foresee that happening in the near future?
What they're doing is they're shaving off first the most vulnerable part of the population. Those are the unborn babies, the embryos, the newborns, the young children, and the weak ones. And then they're shaving off the elderly who've had diseases and illnesses and insults, other types of insults. So the oldest and the youngest are the most vulnerable. Those are going first, as well as weaker people in the sort of middle part of the population. But this is escalating because all of these toxins have a cumulative effect, and combined, they the chemicals and pathogens and even radiation in the chemtrails, the Fukushima radiation, vaccines, GMO food. A scientist at Oak Ridge National Lab, where the depleted uranium comes out of, he ended up being CEO of Monsanto. So no wonder these things are all synchronized. They're moving the scientists around and in between and back and forth so that it's all very well planned out and integrated.
It's all one big happy family. They go from Monsanto to the FDA, from the FDA to the World Bank,
Yes, okay. That's right. And so the best thing, I want to just say that it's not all hopeless. What we need to do is share information as a global community, a local community. We need to build networks and help each other. This is all doable. It's our spirituality. It's right conduct. It's doing the right thing no matter what that will get us through this. And there are solutions. The Japanese found them at Hiroshima and Nagasaki when nobody would help the survivors. So there are ways. It will improve certain aspects of our lives. And programs like yours, you're very courageous to provide this information to the public, and you do it very elegantly too, Paul. Thank you so much. So I don't want people to be crushed or feel that it's hopeless and everything. It's absolutely not. But we do need to stop watching television and hoping this is going to go away. We need to begin to get informed and then to begin finding people to work with and looking for solutions.
I guess before you can solve a problem, one has to realize that there is a problem, and that's what we are trying to do, is to make people aware that yes, these problems do exist. And Leuren, like we kind of running low on time now, so
Yes.
shorter time. I mean, so what we'll do is next time perhaps we'll begin the program by offering some solutions that
Yes.
you have carefully considered and thought of, and that you would like to present. And yes, we don't want to. In the end, it is all going to serve a purpose, but while we're going through it, it is going to be very, very painful and also fatal, at least for the body, for a lot of people. So we need to keep that in mind.
Well,
But,
my website, LeurenMoret.info, has a wealth of information, of solutions, of, for instance, how to get a water purification system going, reverse osmosis system, illnesses, how to treat them, what the causes are, more information about Fukushima and how this radiation circulates. So anything people want to know about lifestyles, about foods to eat, about precautions to take, about how this all happens and works, it's all on the website, LeurenMoret.info.
yeah, thank you, Leuren. I was going to ask you to give out your contact information, so you did that, and I will put that in the link when we post this video, so that all listeners can go to your great website, which of course is a wealth of information, and also has a lot of your interviews and videos that you have done, not only with me, but with other hosts as well. And I congratulate you on being such a prolific researcher, and your information always astounds me, and I'm grateful that you are out there doing what you do. So I would like to thank you once again, and let's come back in the near future and continue discussing these important matters.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You have a great day, Leuren.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.